Okay, everybody, we're going to continue with the second of 3 teams this morning, just so we keep that in mind. Please.
Hello, everyone. We are Team Plastiko from Sparopoulos Studio. I'm Kanika Agarwal.
I'm Wang.
I'm Shansi.
And today we will be discussing about plastic. Plastic is a huge product of Anthropocene era. As we know that our whole ecosystem is formed by 4 elements: earth, air, water, and ground. Plastic is something that we have produced and now are not being able to deal it with. Recycling plastic is not solving this problem, as a very limited amount of it being recycled, and it is creating environmental crisis, turning into microplastic that goes into ocean and eventually is a problem for the planet. Every year, 400 million metric ton of plastic is produced, 1.26 million metric ton every day, and 0.63 million metric ton discarded. If we amount this amount of plastic to, let's say, Eiffel Tower, we have 8,22,000 amount of Eiffel Towers just made from plastic waste, 25,000 Empire State Building. And if we layer the plastic waste to New York, layered approximately 63 meters above the land. This is how much amount of plastic waste is currently lying on our planet. We have come up with a solution to this problem by looking into amoebas, by looking into bacteria and fungi that can degrade plastic. Yes, they can break down and degrade plastic polymers into simpler compounds. As you can see, that life cycle of plastic is never actually complete. We try to recycle them, but what is produced out of raw materials from nature never actually ends up going back to it. But if we use agents like worm and mycelium, we can bioremediate this problem and degrade plastic back into nature. As architects, we are designing an integrated system, not just infrastructure, that includes farm, factory, and recycling facilities, utilizing worms and mycelium within lattice structure to bioremediate plastic waste sustainably. We introduce local solution to this global problem. This is a system we are designing in which plastic is going to come and will be divided into 2 different segments, one in which it is bioremediated using worms, and one which is remediating it using mycelium. And the byproduct of this farm/factory is worm products and mycelium that can be further turned into usable products for other industries. Mycelium is the vegetative part of fungi, and it can degrade plastic through enzymatic actions. Certain fungi secrete enzymes that bioremediate polyethylene and polystyrene, initiating their biodegradation. Fungi life cycle starts from spawn, spore germination, mycelium, and hence grows into mushroom. Temperature, ventilation, and nitrogen source moisture are some conditions that are essential for mycelium effective growth. We ran some initial experiment to see if plastic can be bioremediated by mycelium, and we were able to see some significant results in 10 days where different type of plastics were bioremediated using mycelium in husk substrate. These are some initial simulations that we performed that showed us how mycelium bridges seeking plastic nearby as a food agent, food component. And these are some further mycelium bridging simulations. These simulations shows how mycelium grows differently in lateral and vertical environments. Now we started developing a system, and we wanted to choose a site. Based on urban position, soil data recognition, stigmergy, and terraforming, we decided to choose a site near London. Greater London is a huge area. We took land surface temperature map, soil moisture index map, and soil type map, tried to arrange them using this data, and overlaid them. What we came up was data map, when overlaid with land use map, gave us a site that is conveniently near to London and give us appropriate soil type, soil temperature, and conditions good for mycelium growth. These are some contours. These are the contours of our site that, when overlaid on these bedrock permeability map, tells us how what are the starting points in which we start terraforming our landscape. Now we talk about underground system and how we are using mycelium to degrade plastic. We started looking into ant colonies and how their structure and their ventilation system is a good example for us to dig underground. One of this is anthill. We started looking into how stigmergy can be a agent-based system by which we can dig under the ground. Then we started exploring the possibility of two-dimensional stigmergy, understanding ant path formation, and started simulating 3D stigmergy paths using different parameters like number of agents, view angles, initial speed, and spawn position. We got different results as we started changing the parameters, and then using food as attractors and bedrocks as repellers, we understood how we can use these parameters to dig underground. We started visualizing how these simulations can be dug under the ground and go up to 40 meters in the depth of the ground. Using these pathways, we dig tunnels, which eventually turn into a system that helps us to decompose plastic. This is a tunnel-based system that will be dug under the ground, in which plastic will be deposited and mycelium spawning will be done. In these tunnels, eventually plastic will bioremediate within a span of 3 months. Over here, we understand why spherical buds are being used to decompose plastic, so that from all the sides, plastic can be decomposed using mycelium. We started looking into some robots that can help us digging the earth, depositing the plastic, and eventually spawning the earth. This is the robot, and this robot helps us in plastic collection, plastic decomposition. It helps us to dig the earth and eventually terraform. This is a diagram showing how this robot is digging inside an earth section and how it's depositing the plastic. We are also talking about terraforming in how we are using contour local maxima points to form crater-like structures. Then the earth digged from these craters are eventually deposited to local minimas, creating more mounds and eventually creating more contours. This is a simulation telling us how, if we visualize the pixelization of Earth, craters are being formed. These craters are being formed by these robots in the real time, and we are using approximately hundreds of robots at the same time to deal with a site that is approximately 4 kilometers long.
We found that the mealworms can also digest plastic. In mealworm life cycle, there are 4 stages. Only in larva stage, mealworm can consume plastic, and about 4 months. And the worm can totally digest styrofoam into carbon dioxide and biodegradable feces. If a mealworm can consume 0.127 mg of plastic per day, we would need 8 million mealworms to consume 1 kilogram of plastic daily. We started from testing different types of styrofoam, same size but different density, and we also tested different shape of styrofoams. We found that worms can digest more styrofoam in low density and in cube shape. Then we move on to the tower experiment to find out the worm movement in tower shape. We started to put worms in different level, and the worms prefer to get close to the heat and try to avoid light. So we designed the light experiment to guide the worms to move in a linear space. So we can use the darkness to shift worms from one place to another. And also we use simulation to show the behavior of worms in different heat, light conditions according to the dynamic condition changing. Then we started to test worm performance in heat, darkness, and food conditions. We put worms in the center box and gave performance in the surrounding boxes. They prefer darkness more than food and the last heat. In the space performance experiment, they like to go to the smaller boxes than the larger box. And there is a large amount of worm industry over the world. And worm can be food for both human and animals, and also can be protein powder. And we try to think of how to separate worms after a few days, make sure the worm condition is suitable for worms to live in and also for them to digest plastic. So we designed the separation prototype. We used 2 boxes to put it in different level, put plastic and food worms inside one box. After 3 days, we used the food to guide them to the new box, and we can see if the previous one in the experiment. We found that the small cube worm can digest it really fast, and it can also be easily separated from pupa and worm droppings. So we divided the worm separation system into 2 different stages. First, we use active separation to move the live worms from one box to another using light, heat, food, and to guide them. And for the waste part, we use different size of sieve to separate remaining plastic, pupa, beetles, and worm droppings. Then we think of the upper ground system for worms, and it's a dynamic grade-based system for worms to digest plastic. And we did a count of a square kilometer area of London. According to the population, it creates total waste production per day is 1,226 kilograms. So we need 2.5 billion worms to digest them. And in the worm box, there are several layers, and when the box need to be changed, the previous box started to be clear, and prepared box can be dark, so the worms can shift to the new one. And in our deliver robot, it can move in 4 directions, and after lifting up the upper layer, the wheels can be raised and move in a different direction. And this is how it looks like in the one level. And the deliver robot can reach different levels to put the new boxes and also take away the old ones. And in our prototype, it can move front, back, and also rotate. In our worm system, there are like 3 kinds of grid. Red is an active one, which worm live inside. And after some certain time, the prepared grid start to move to the active grid and do the exchange. So the active grid becomes the remaining grid. In every level, there are some prepared grid ready for the active grid to exchange. So after the exchanging, the active grid will go down 1 level, so we can put the worms at the top and collect them at the bottom.
And after we set up the logic of the worm system, it becomes a spreading and growing system. And well, we want to make it a form, a shape, but not just a crazy growing logic. So we add some constraints spatially into this system. And inspired by the glass sponge, or some coral, which forming itself responds to the situation of itself and the environment. We let our system is differential into 2 parts. One is a horizontal traffic, which means inside of the system there always a rotating for the robot. And what else is a vertical traffic scaffold, which we are attaching to the edge of the system and stop the system growth from this direction and provide a traffic for a vertical transport. Talk about the boundary control system. So first step is, detecting for each active unit, and it will detect the 2 steps further for one direction. And if there are consecutive 2 empty units, it will become block part of this direction, and if there are a certain amount of the consecutive units of this direction block, it will construct into a boundary attached to the vertical transporting scaffold and provide the vertical transport. In 2D, it will create this kind of coral-like curve, or not curve, but the spreading system. It will shape the system into a certain, but not crazily growing. And move to 3D, change a little bit, but not calculating the consecutive, but more like an average score. And it will create a dynamic, changing, ever-changing system to make a different shape. And we want to make sure inside of the system there is always a path for the robot running inside and arrange all the system, all the stuff. So we develop a path generating system algorithm to make sure there's a path inside. So basically we detecting each active unit again, and it will calculate the neighbor. If they have already have 3 active neighbor, it will block the next one, the rest one. And the next type, second type of blocks, like if there is empty unit and it have 3 active neighbor, it will become the block type B, but not directly calculating into the block, but will participant into the block C. Next. And each unit, empty unit, we're calculating the neighbor, and if they have enough neighbor with block B and the active unit, it will become the block C to make sure stop the mycelium, stop the worms come to this unit and block the path. Okay. So it will become this kind of path generating system to make sure each layer, each active unit is reachable for the robots, to help them to clean the units, to exchanging, to bring the new blocks in. And it will become a pathfinding system inside to let the box, let the robots go in to arrange all of the stuff in 3D. Next. And combining these 2 systems, it will become this kind of system with a boundary and pathfinding system inside to make sure every part connect every layer of the system, and every robot can transport between the inside of the system. Next. And how can we merge these 2 kind of agents, the mycelium and worm, in a same site? So we divide the process into 3 stages. The first stage is underground structural shaping. We digging underground and send the mycelium and plastic in and shape the terrain. And go to next stage, we introduce the grid system, the worms in, and both the underground and upper ground is running to digest the plastic. And at the end, after 3 months, when the mycelium already digests all the plastic, and we will stop the generating of the new box inside of the grid system, and it will withdraw that chunk, and the mycelium can go in again to reshape the terrain again and again to create a circulation of the site. So there is a diagram for the 2 systems, how they co-working. Like you can see the upper ground, there is a grid system, the worm comes in, and the underground, there is a tunnel system for the mycelium growth. And plastic goes in, product comes out. And here is a diagram, a simulate for how these 2 systems work together. You can see in the rest of the system, rest of the worm system, the terrain, the creators comes out, and after that the worm system will comes in, and in the empty place, it will reshape the terrain again. Yeah, here is another version with color code to demonstrate it, like the, here is a render of this kind of system, and the light part is the worm is exchanging, which drives by light to make the worms go to the next box. Yeah. And we pixelize the site for the worm because the size is too, there is a large scale diff between the 1 meter square box and the 4 kilometer long length. And it will, so these two kind of system will keep circling in the site and bring a different landscape and looking from the air of the site. And here the simulate of how this looking and circulation of the site. The red dot means that the worm system running, and the black one is the rest part for the terrain reshaping. And here are several iterations of how the system looks from the site.
Thank you. These are our models. These are first of the few samples of how worms degraded styrofoam. Then we looked at how mycelium is degrading different type of plastic PS, PU, PT. This is our one of the section model of the site in which underground we have mycelium tunnels and upperground we have worm grid system as well as terraforming happening on the site. These are the timelines of how terraforming will be happening over the span of 4 months. These two tunnel systems are of two different colors to demonstrate how active tunnel system is going to be different from the tunnel system that currently has mycelium filled up. The system that has mycelium filled up is going to be on the below the worm system, and the active one will be only under the craters. This is a blown-up model of the section model. It shows how terrain is interacting with the grid system and sitting on it seamlessly. This is one of our initial experiments of how worms prefer darkness over food and heat. This is a grid-based system showing how boxes move into the grid and how the whole system is dynamic in nature. One of the smaller grid system, and how grid system is sitting on the landscape. Thank you.
Hello. I think this is amazing. I really hope one day we can do this. It's such a great solution to plastic, such an issue. And congratulations on doing such an incredible project. My thought was like, this is a huge scale. It's like, it's like the size of a city, basically. And I was wondering if there's any way that you could make it a lot more attractive on the outside, or else it might look like a shipping container yard, which are quite big, or not that I have anything against social housing, but people, they tend to avoid wanting to live next to very massive conglomeracies that just kind of take over. What if it was like a vertical garden, or, I don't know if you guys have been to Singapore, and you know how every piece of land they give back by putting the green on the building, but that makes it look so amazing. I was there just like photographing all these mega structures with hanging gardens. I know it's like one step, but again, I'm always looking at like, this is not just ideas, these are like reality. And then what's just the very practical aspect about it is like, do you want to live next to this mega structure of moving worms? I think it's so cool though, but then how do you make it beautiful? And I think architects are afraid to talk about beauty, but even this model is beautiful, but in actuality, they're not translucent boxes, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they are, or they're not colorful, or then how do you make it like people want to live next to the vertical garden because it gives back in other ways. But it's a fantastic project, and thanks so much for this idea. This needs to get published. How do we get this out there? This is so good. Actually, I know a lot of people in plastics, Oh yeah, the Lohia family, they're all looking for solutions to recycling, and yeah, I feel like we need to like send this to them, right? This is great.
I just want to build on that. Super topic, super interesting experiments. When you were presenting, I was thinking, could this be part of the retrofitting, global retrofitting efforts where there's units, that do both the underground and the above ground. I had one question I didn't understand fully. Can you actually, from a health perspective, eat the worms after they consume plastic? No, you can eat them before, but after, are they still food? Yeah?
Become part of the body and carbon dioxide.
Amazing. So, because, the beautiful thing about this solution, I think, is that not only does it, dissolve plastic, but also you do create food and you do create material for reuse, right? Mycelium can, and that's really, I think there's a scale. I had a similar feeling about the scale where, it would maybe make sense to think about decentralized structures, but it's a really amazing piece of work, and I do also believe that it would be interesting to see how this can work in different settings. One other thing that came to mind was that it's maybe also really interesting to see if end of life Amazon fulfillment centers could be repurposed, because you have a lot of the structure already right in there, and find practical ways of how to get this into the world.
I don't really have an idea of scale. Can anybody tell me what sort of scale is it? 4 kilometers. Poof, I think your point about gardening is very important. It's a massive problem. The idea is fantastic, and again, it's something which is being researched at the moment by bioregeneration. And I think it's a bold idea to follow through from the grisly start to the whole process, right through to a proposal for a structure which is increasing the performance of the whole process idea to a very large scale. And I sympathize with the environmental implications of it and how you deal with it in the real world. But a very thorough piece of work with an imaginative end.
Well, I think I totally agree. I think the research is quite impressive. It's also, I think, the first time that live worms come into the DRL, so that's also very exciting to see for the first time, right? But I had similar feelings, right? I think you walk us through to the whole research and the principles, and I think it's a great concept and very relevant and a great way to understand and treat plastic for recycling, I think that's commendable and really a great achievement. But I kept looking at the models and just hoping that there will be a moment where we will see how we will inhabit these structures. I think we can all imagine ourselves walking through this space below, with the terrain, with the pixels adapting to the terrain. I think you could see wonderful spaces in there. I think, yes, the scale maybe is a bit too much, but I thought there would be a moment where you will use the fungi to create construction material, then parts of it will become labs where people inhabit actually these spaces, they move through them, and then they become not only isolated storage facility, let's say, when the process is happening, but you can really live into them, and that's where the beauty will come into this structure, which they are already have a lot of beautiful moments and great architectural spaces, right? So that moment when it just becomes that only robots move up and down and container, I felt that there was an element of us humans wanting to see what would be the potential to create living communities, research facilities that will be part of not just something that you'd never want to go, but that people actually are there living and enjoying, and it becomes part of saving the nature and the communities. Yeah, but overall, it's very, very nicely done. Yeah.
Yeah, look, we could be. Oh, this is not. Oh, it is. Sorry. So, it's great that you built the model. We're starting to look at it as a piece in the landscape. Maybe we should have rendered it more. Data centers, garbage deposit sites. We have these big pieces and infrastructures which sustain the city, and the scale of this is to do with the scale of London, right? This is taking care of the plastic of London, and that's what we're looking at. And you put it out in the estuary, you put it on the waterfront for some reason, so that there will be a presence, and that's maybe not a bad thing in itself. But I do like what Paul just said, maybe, will there be labs inside? What is there a human element? And how would that be rendered in the landscape? It would be interesting to see. I had one other question is, these two processes are competing or parallel. We maybe don't know yet which is more efficient. Why are putting one on top of the other? That wasn't clear. It's actually quite interesting that although the one is invisible most, it has this craterscape, which is also be good to see, and probably being the one on top might not make it more efficient and easy to interface with the one below. So I'm quietly questioning that, although of course then you would double, you would have kind of 8 kilometers. But if 4 kilometers is not scary, I mean, it isn't scary to me, then 8 kilometers isn't either, or you make it. But anyway, it's stunning and it's interesting, and I encouraged you to visualize it, and you have done that to some extent, and I want to see more of that, because that's part of also the public engagement of a piece like this.
That's such a good idea, that it's an estuary. Imagine this becoming an animal reserve, because right now, plastic does take up this size on the waterway. The waterway, which is supposed to be the most expensive real estate, it's supposed to be home to animals, and then you're recreating this city, but it's so symbolic, and then it becomes like habitation. And I think because we're architects, we're all waiting for the moment where we're expecting some sort of habitation in here. We thought, and then we realized, okay, it's just a structure for recycling, which is beautiful, but then that one step further could be really amazing. And I feel like this is actually a real project, you know what I mean? And then it's about getting funding for ideas. And I was thinking, I'm a Lego ambassador, and they are struggling with, no, I'm serious, and they're telling me one of their biggest struggle is finding, because the way that the Lego clicks and it's tight, they can't use recycled plastic for that. And obviously it's an issue, it's becoming a bigger issue. So would that be a great partner to work with? This almost looks like Lego to me, The fact that it's moving, it might be a hazard for people to occupy it, but maybe, I don't know, not animals don't crush a nest, but I just think it could be beautiful, then it could be 8 kilometers if it's an estuary, right? That would be incredible.
Well, I mean, can I just jump in? It strikes me that, today the world richest man has made his fortune by building ginormous shed in the landscape and digging tunnels, pretty much, and then many other things coming after. But to a certain extent, I think you are showing what really the society that we want to become, perhaps, if we are to inhabit this planet for longer, should be thinking in terms of architecture's expanded, ambition, right? So, to me, this structure is a kind of the new gigafactory, if you want, for the biodigital age, right? And I think in that sense, there are opportunities that you have, I think, uncovered, but not completely engaged with. The absence of humans, it's in a way, for me, curious, because then it kind of opens up for what could be a completely, let's say, non-anthropocentric take of a kind of autonomous system. And at the moment, there is this kind of robotic element on top, and then there is this kind of biological living element below it. And for me, the interest would be how the two kind of learn from each other in a way, almost in a process of a kind of a constant feedback loop. I would imagine mycelium as well as silkworms, they have behaviors. They are a form of intelligence, right? That you have observed. In some moments when I look at these videos, I wish you would have been more patient in observing them. Most of these videos stops in the moment when they begin to be interesting for me, right? And you move on. sometimes you need to kind of really embrace the non-anthropocentrisms and maybe believe that in these forms of behavior there is something interesting that we can learn, or that your robotic autonomous factory can learn from them, right? And you know, I don't know if that's the kind of world that you are envisioning or not, but for me, these models, I really love these two models. I think they're really elegant and beautiful, but at the same time, I think that really, for me, want to come to life in a way that you know, they cannot at the moment, not just because they are made of plastic themselves, but because I think you haven't observed enough what these forms of life can give you when you consider them forms of intelligence as well. And I think that's the kind of moment in which the whole thing shifts, the paradigm shifts on its head, and you know, and this whole big shed thing becomes something else. It becomes alive, and it's sort of, you know, and the beauty really comes from that, in my opinion, not just from, let's say, the kind of morphology as such, or the articulation that we can see.
But there's also the modularity of your system does lend it to an evolutionary aspect to it, which would be interesting to. I think it's really great how you've demonstrated the scale that this could exist. In your system, you've resolved a lot of complexity on how this, what formations and the path and everything that needs to be resolved so that it functions. But the global form of it can be driven by other instances, and this evolution that it will start at a smaller scale. And what is it that drives what's going to be dug, the landscaping, and what's going to be built in terms of the grid, and what possibilities could that create in terms of the global form of it and an interface to the urban landscape as well, at different scales and different times?
And I think,
dear Auntie, I've moved down from Middlesbrough. I'm living on the Thames estuary in a megastructure. I'm at C9, 44th level, B2/46, and I'm scared. It's the rustling. It's the rustling that's terrifying. Next door, it's rustling. Please help. Love, George.
George is a mealworm. 1 of 8 billion in a megastructure. I think it's working. You can hear me?
Yeah.
What about that? Okay. From my perspective, I think it's important that scale is relational to the problem at hand. So I think to see it as a site and a context, I think is just a testing scenario for a problem and a way of addressing it, which I think they could be a little bit more forceful in terms of speaking to the problem, because I think they're being a bit polite with the numbers. But the reality of this stuff is that this plastic waste is our society. The difference is we don't live with it because we send it somewhere else. And I think the issue of this isn't like a monument to plastic in some kind of propaganda statement. This is really trying to, I think, look at bioremediation and what it means in a much more local level. So in one sense, it's a global problem, and I think the promise of the project is to localize it so that a lot of this can be done as a prototype in different contexts, and the strategies for how that would be integrated in the city, I think, have to be strategic rather than completely dependent on soil. Is more about also where the plastic is coming from, where are the existing facilities, and how this plugs in as another infrastructure in a sense. Some of the things that I think were some of the precursors of this in terms of references, if we look at fresh kills in New York and so forth, they do have over time the capacity that these kind of environments, even the landfill environments, become new kind of public offerings. I think to jump into that without addressing maybe some of the logistics, like for me it's very important that they did the algorithmic, strategic, automation, simulations and so forth. I think we need to kind of earn complexity, and I think students and projects and architects, I agree, have to have a certain sensitivity to the things that they're observing. They spent about 8 months with these mealworms, and they meaning us, and me being next to these things, because instead of them having them next to their desks, they decided that the director should be the person that has to deal with mealworms every day. My general point about it is the two species and why they're together, Patrick, is because they basically consume different forms of plastic. So they're not something that are competing, they're actually addressing slightly different take on plastics. Even the acknowledgement that plastics and all different forms of production actually have very different constraints. It's a huge topic, and I think what I applaud the team for doing is actually looking at this as not just an architectural project or new aesthetics that are coming from this, which is for sure going to happen just by the nature of looking at this seriously, but is about sort of discovering and uncovering research that you could start to also participate in, conversations that can be had with people that are working with this, you know, from many lifetimes in a sense, trying to find solutions, but don't have a vision plan of basically how to integrate that with some of the real world problems. I don't think it's that difficult to look at automation at this scale. And there's a company called like AutoStore and all of these other things that do this kind of stuff literally for Amazon, super high dense packing, you know, more than just the open plan stuff that warehouses are like today. So even doing that in a 4D way, I think is an acknowledgement that this is the landscape that we operate. If we're conscious of it or not, if we want to live next to it or not, these are, of course, important issues, but I think in terms of working on it from a research perspective, I think it's really important that even looking at these videos, it's not that they have a charm for it, it is a different intelligence. It's trying to use, you know, biological kind of intelligence to deal with our inability to be an intelligent with the materials that we use or the society that we try to live in, a kind of consumer waste society. So I think the project has a lot of issues that you guys should continue to build on. I think it's also important that these kind of projects can't just be collaged or made into forms of representation, spending the time with really your collaborators, and probably the people that were directing the project are the worms and the mycelium and less your tutors. I think that that's also very important because that really starts to speak to like how we actually try to work on projects. So I think in terms of the conversation and the proposal, I support everything that's being put on the table. I think it's part of a world that we need to be more conscious of. But I think that there's a sensitivity to find, you know, how all of this byproduct is also then potentially now new industries. We know mycelium, you know, is a foam substitute, and that kind of production, after it's synthesized in this way, could be used at least for packing and other forms of, you know, supporting the kinds of things that unfortunately are part of our lifestyle. They're not going to change. I think that this isn't about a greenwashing sustainability kind of idea. It's about an acknowledgement of the hard truths that are there, and I feel like these kind of projects are important because in some way they're in your face. I don't know if they're polite. I don't know if that big massing scares us or not, but that's the reality of it. So I think scale is maybe not the right way to approach it. It's more relational to the problem that we have. So we may have to find ways to be more informed about how we try to treat these global problems. But I think just even acknowledging that and having that in the context of the DRL, I think is also important. And within the school, I think it's part of these larger initiatives for like Global Climate Week and all of these other things that we do, but I feel that this project has a very important contribution to that, which is how do we work on the project and kind of make it something that we could have more engaged conversations with people that also that they can collaborate. So just to echo Marco's point to the previous team, I do think that these are kinds of projects that you can really try to work on. These are people that you can go out to meet and discuss, and I do think you can get funding for things like this because it's a problem that's not going away. So anyway, I think it's a very good way to continue the conversation. We have one more team, if there's any. Did you want anything? Anybody else has a closing comment? I'm just going to close it here and we'll keep it going. Thanks so much.